The great hall of an alien empire, 2,000 nobles, silver armor in purple robes, and the kind of silence that only happens right before something breaks. Cameras closer now, a throne, a woman on it taller than any man in the room, her eyes the color of black glass. Closer still, an old human standing before her, 64 years old, dress uniform, 3 rows of ribbons, 6 clusters of medals, hands that will not shake no matter what they cost him to keep still. The Empress leans forward. She has one question. She has been waiting 50 years to ask it of someone who can answer. And behind her right shoulder, a man in a purple robe is smiling the kind of smile a man wears when he thinks he has already won. He has not. He is about to reach for something inside his robe. And the old soldier in front of the throne is about to say a number no one in this hall will ever be able to forget. The alarm didn't wake him. It never did anymore. Marcus Hale was already sitting up, 3 in the morning, same time as always. His hands were shaking, not badly, just enough to notice. He reached for the pill bottle on the nightstand. 2 tablets, dry swallow, the bitter taste on the back of his tongue. He didn't need water anymore. He'd stopped needing water for this ritual about 15 years ago. The clock read 3:04. He'd been doing this for 412 nights. He knew the number because he'd counted once on a bad night, and then he couldn't stop counting because that's what you did when you'd survived 99 wars. You counted. You counted the nights. You counted the pills. You counted the friends who weren't there anymore, which was most of them, which was all of them, actually. He stood up, 64 years old. His knees popped like they were trying to tell him something. He didn't listen. He never listened to his knees. The window of his quarters looked out over the Meridian Station observation deck. Below him, the earth spun slow and blue. Above him, stars, just stars, nothing else. He liked it that way because stars didn't ask questions. His apartment was small, 15 square meters of the cheapest housing the station allowed for a decorated veteran. He could have applied for something bigger. He didn't. Bigger meant more space to fill. More space to fill meant more absence to notice. 15 square meters was exactly enough for one man who wasn't planning to have visitors. The walls were bare. No photographs, no paintings, no little decorative junk that people collect when they think their life is going to keep going in a straight line. Marcus had learned early that lives don't go in straight lines, they go in circles. And the circles get smaller and smaller until you're standing in the middle of a 15-meter apartment at 3 in the morning and you're the only thing left. There was one thing on the wall, a guitar, old wooden, the kind of acoustic 6-string his father had played on the porch of their colony house when Marcus was 5 years old. The strings were probably dead. He hadn't touched it in 46 years. His father had given it to him the day Marcus enlisted. Play it when you come home, his father had said. Not before, just when you come home. Marcus had come home. He'd never played it because his father had died in the Third War. And Marcus had never figured out what home meant after that. Home was a place. His father was a person. And you couldn't play a song for a place. So the guitar just hung there, waiting. The communist chimed. Marcus didn't move. It chimed again. Third chime, fourth. Whoever was calling wasn't going to stop. He walked over, pressed the button. Hale, Marcus, it's Nadia. Ambassador Nadia Okafor, his boss. Sort of. He was a cultural liaison, which meant he did whatever paperwork the actual diplomats didn't want to do. She was the actual diplomat. She called him twice a year, maybe 3 times, and it was always because someone above her needed a favor she couldn't refuse. He looked at the clock, 3:11. In her time zone, it was 10 in the morning. She'd waited until she knew he'd be awake, which meant she knew about the pills, which meant this was serious. Nadia, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting. You're standing. I can hear it. Sit down, Marcus. He sat. She had that voice. The voice that had gotten her the ambassadorship at 32, which was young for a job like that. The voice that made senators shut up. The voice that made warlords take her seriously. It was not the voice of a woman making a request. It was the voice of a woman who had already decided. The Vranar Empire is reviewing the treaty, she said. He waited. They're considering pulling out of the alliance. He waited longer. Marcus, say something. You said something. I'm listening. She sighed. He heard the sigh through 40 light years of subspace transmission. It arrived slightly delayed, slightly flattened, but it was still recognizable as the specific sigh of a woman who had known him a long time and was tired of him already. I need you to come with me to the Vernar court, a diplomatic reception, 3 weeks. No. Marcus, no. You haven't heard the reason. I don't need to hear the reason. Marcus. Nadia. There was a pause. Then she said the thing she'd been holding back. The thing that had made her call him at 3 in the morning, his time at 10 in the morning hers. The thing she'd been rehearsing on the flight over from the capital, probably. The thing she'd told her deputy she was going to say if he refused. You're the only living human whose service record they will respect. Marcus closed his eyes. He knew what she meant. He'd known what she meant the moment she said Vernar. Because the Vernar were a warrior culture. And warrior cultures didn't respect diplomats. They didn't respect politicians. They didn't respect academics. They respected scars. And Marcus had a lot of scars. Send someone else, he said. There is no one else. There are hundreds of veterans. There are hundreds of veterans with 3 wars, maybe 4. There's one with 99. He didn't answer. Marcus, please. He looked at the guitar on the wall. He looked at the pill bottle. He looked at the star field outside the window. When do we leave, he said. Tomorrow, 0800, docking bay 6. Fine. He clicked the comm off. He sat in the dark. For a long time. He didn't sleep again that night. He didn't sleep the next night either. He almost never did. The transport was smaller than he'd expected, which was fine. Marcus preferred small transports. Big ones had too many people, too many chances to be recognized, too many chances for someone to see the metal ribbon on his collar and try to shake his hand. He hated when people tried to shake his hand because he never knew what to do with his hands afterward. He boarded at 7:52, 8 minutes early. He'd been 8 minutes early to everything in his life. Basic training, combat drops, funerals, especially funerals. You didn't want to walk into a funeral late. It made people look at you. There were 3 other passengers. Nadia already seated reading something on a tablet, a young officer he didn't recognize, and a Vernar liaison at the front, tall and gray-skinned, not looking at anyone. Marcus took a seat by the window. The young officer stood up, walked over, sat down across from him. Marcus did not look up. Sir, Lieutenant Rhea Marsden, I've been assigned as your escort officer for the duration of the mission. He did not answer. Sir, I heard you. Yes, sir. You don't need to escort me anywhere, Lieutenant. I'm 64 years old. I know how to walk. Ambassador Okafor's orders, sir. Of course they are. He finally looked up. She was young, very young, 28 maybe, dark hair pulled back tight, the kind of jaw that meant she'd grown up meaning it. Her uniform was pressed within an inch of its life. The service pin on her collar was Fleet Intelligence. She had one combat ribbon, just one. She was scared of him. He could see it in her eyes. Not scared in a bad way. Scared in the way young officers were always scared of veterans, because they'd read about him, because they'd studied him in the academy, because they'd probably written a paper about him once, and now here he was, and he was smaller than she'd imagined, and older and quieter. You've read my file, he said. Yes, sir. All of it, twice, sir. Then you know I don't like escorts. Yes, sir. And I'm still your escort, sir. He almost smiled. Almost. It didn't quite make it to his mouth, but something moved. Something in the muscles around his eyes that had forgotten how to move. Sit down, Lieutenant. I am sitting, sir. Then sit quietly. Yes, sir. She sat quietly for about 11 seconds. Sir, Lieutenant, sir, I just wanted to say, don't, sir, my father. Lieutenant, she stopped. Marcus looked out the window. The station was falling away below them. The earth was a blue disk, now smaller by the second. The stars were getting brighter as the transport pulled out of the local light. He knew what she'd been about to say. He'd heard it 1,000 times. My father served with you. My uncle served with you. My grandfather served with you. And Marcus was supposed to remember them. And he never did, because there had been too many and they were all dead. He wasn't going to do that to her today. He said, save it, Lieutenant, for when we're planetside. Sir, I mean it. Yes, sir. The transport punched through subspace. The stars smeared. Marcus closed his eyes. He did not sleep, but he almost did. They arrived at the Vranar homeworld 6 hours later. It was beautiful. Marcus hadn't expected it to be beautiful. He'd expected it to be martial, gray, angular, like every Vranar warship he'd ever encountered. But the homeworld wasn't like the warships. The homeworld was green, impossibly green, 2 moons overhead, a sky the color of old copper. The capital city rose out of a valley. Spires, white stone, bridges arching between them like ribs. The reception delegation was waiting on the landing pad. 12 Vrinar in ceremonial dress, silver armor, cloaks. Not a single smile among them, which Marcus had expected. Vrinar didn't smile at humans. They didn't smile at each other much either. At the front of the delegation stood a man, not a soldier, a courtier, tall, gray-skinned like the rest, but softer in the face, older, perhaps 80 in human years, though it was hard to tell with Vrinar. His eyes were black and quick. He wore a robe, a long one, deep purple embroidered at the hem with something that looked like a family sigil. He stepped forward as Marcus descended the ramp. Commander Hale, Marcus stopped. You have me at a disadvantage. Lord Caven, senior advisor to the imperial court. He extended a hand. The Vranar had picked up the handshake from humans. Marcus took it. The grip was firm, too firm, the kind of grip that was testing something. Marcus did not squeeze back. He'd stopped playing that game about 70 years ago. Caven held the handshake 3 seconds too long, then released. Welcome to Vranar Prime Commander. I'm not a commander anymore, retired. Ah, of course, old habits. Caven smiled. It was not a nice smile. Marcus did not smile back. Nadia stepped in, filling the silence with something diplomatic and useless. Caven's attention shifted to her. Marcus watched. He watched the way Caven looked at Nadia, not with hostility, with calculation, like he was measuring her, like he was deciding what she was worth. Marcus knew that look. He'd seen it in 100 officers over the years. The ones who thought they were smarter than everyone else in the room. The ones who thought they were playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Caven was one of those, which meant Caven was dangerous. Rhea leaned in beside him. Her voice was low. Sir, that man. I know. You noticed? I noticed. What do we do? Nothing. Yet. Sir. Nothing, Lieutenant. She stepped back. He appreciated that she stepped back. Most young officers wouldn't have. Most young officers would have pushed. They would have needed to prove they were paying attention. She didn't need to prove anything. She just needed him to know she'd seen it too, which meant she was smarter than her file suggested, which meant this trip was going to be more complicated than he'd hoped. The Imperial Palace was a mile from the landing pad. They walked. Marcus was grateful for the walk. His legs were stiff from the transport. The cool Vranar air felt good on his face. The 2 moons were rising in tandem over the eastern ridge. Everything smelled like something between cedar and old rain. Nadia walked ahead with Caven. Rhea walked beside Marcus, matching his pace. She didn't speak. He appreciated that too. After about 10 minutes, she said, "Sir, permission to say one thing." Denied. "Sir, fine, one thing. My father was Captain Elias Marsden. He served under you on the Terminus offensive. He was killed in the third week." Marcus stopped walking. The path stretched ahead of them. Nadia and Kevin were 40 meters ahead now. The rest of the delegation was further back. Marcus and Rhea were alone in the middle of a strange planet under two moons and copper sky. He turned to her. "Marsden." "Yes, sir." "Elias Marsden." "Yes, sir." He closed his eyes. He remembered. He remembered a lot of names, too many names, but this one had a face. Elias Marsden had been 29 years old. He'd had a wife back on Delta Station. He'd had a daughter who was 3. He'd been killed by a plasma round to the chest, and Marcus had held him while he died because he'd been the closest officer and because Elias had asked him to. Elias had said, "Tell my girl I tried." And Marcus had said, "I will." And then Marcus had written a letter because that's what you did. You wrote the letter because if you didn't write the letter, no one else would. And a 3-year-old girl deserved to grow up knowing her father had died trying to come home. Marcus opened his eyes. Rhea was looking at him. Not the way young officers usually looked at him. Not the hero worship look. Not the pity look. She was looking at him the way you look at someone you've been trying to meet your whole life. "You wrote the letter," she said. "Yes. My mother kept it, on the mantle, my whole life. Lieutenant, I'm not going to cry, sir. I know. I just needed you to know." "I know." She nodded once. They started walking again. They didn't say anything else for the rest of the walk. Marcus didn't need her to say anything else. He understood now. He understood why Nadia had assigned her. Nadia was not a subtle woman when she was trying to be helpful. She had put a ghost next to him. A living ghost. A ghost with a jawline and a service pin and a father's face somewhere in her jeans. He should have been angry. He wasn't. He was tired. But he wasn't angry. The palace was larger inside than outside, which shouldn't have been possible. But Marcus had learned long ago that alien architecture didn't obey the same rules as human architecture. The Vernar built things according to some inner logic that felt like it was borrowed from cathedrals and mountain ranges. The ceilings were high, too high. The corridors were long, too long. Everything echoed. They were led to their quarters. Marcus's room was on the 4th floor, overlooking a garden. There was a bed, a desk, a wash basin. There was nothing on the walls. He liked it. He set his single duffel on the floor. He walked to the window. The garden below was full of white flowers. He didn't know what they were. He didn't care. They were pretty. That was enough. There was a knock on the door. "Come," Rhea entered. She was still in uniform. She was holding a tablet. "Sir, the reception is at 1900 hours. Formal dress," Ambassador Okafor said. "I know what she said." "Yes, sir." "Anything else?" "Sir, about Lord Caven." "Yes. I ran his file, or what we have of his file. He's been at court for 42 years, senior advisor for the last 20. He's not a soldier. He's a political operator." I gathered. "Sir, there are irregularities." "Of what kind?" "I can't say yet, but I want to look into it. If you'll authorize." "Authorize what?" "An unofficial inquiry." He looked at her. She was standing very straight. She was very young. She was the daughter of a man who had died in his arms 25 years ago. She was technically subordinate to him, though he had no official rank anymore. She was asking his permission to do something that could get her career ended. "Lieutenant?" "Sir?" "Do you know what happens to intelligence officers who investigate foreign nobles without authorization?" "Yes, sir." "Then why are you asking?" "Because I don't trust him, sir. And you don't either." He almost smiled again. "Look into it, quietly. Report to me only. If Nadia asks, you're studying the treaty." "Yes, sir." "And Lieutenant?" "Sir, don't get yourself killed on my account." "No, sir." She left. Marcus stood at the window for a long time. The flowers below were very white. The reception was as bad as he'd feared. The great hall was full. Vrenar nobles in silver and purple, human delegates in stiff formal wear, ambassadors from 3 other member species standing awkwardly in corners. Music played. Vrenar music. It sounded like whales having an argument. Marcus stood by the wall. He'd worn the dress uniform. Fun hadn't wanted to, but protocol had demanded it. And so there he was in the full navy blue of the Terran Coalition, with every ribbon and every medal he'd earned in 46 years of service. 3 rows of ribbons, 6 clusters of medals, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Fleet Cross with 2 stars, the Combat Achievement Medal with he'd lost count of the clusters on that one. He looked like a Christmas tree. He hated it. He'd never liked wearing the medals. He'd worn them when he had to. Funerals, ceremonies, congressional testimony, but he'd always felt like an imposter because the medals weren't his. They belonged to the people who died so he could earn them. He stood by the wall. He drank water. He waited for the reception to be over. That was when he heard the laugh. It came from across the room. A young Vrenar officer, silver armor junior rank, standing with 3 other officers, looking at Marcus, laughing. Marcus knew that laugh. He'd heard it 1,000 times in 1,000 bars. It was the laugh of a young man who thought he was smarter than an old one. The laugh of a young man who hadn't yet learned that the old man across the room had earned his place there. Rhea was next to Marcus. She stiffened. "Sir, that officer just—" "I heard," he said. "I don't want to know. He said your medals look like a child playing dress-up." Marcus took a slow breath. "Lieutenant." "Yes, sir." "Do you know what the correct response to that is?" "No, sir." "Nothing." "Sir." "Nothing, Lieutenant." Her hand had moved toward her sidearm. She wasn't wearing one. Ceremonial dress. But her hand had moved anyway. Old instinct. She caught herself. She lowered the hand. "He's too young to know," Marcus said. "He should know, sir." "He will, someday." "Sir, someday he'll be old lieutenant, and a young officer will laugh at his medals. And on that day he'll remember tonight, and he'll understand." She was quiet. "That's not enough, sir." "It's what there is." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I don't know how you do it." "Do what?" "Not react." Marcus took a small sip of his water. He looked at the young Vrenar officer across the room. The officer had already moved on. He was laughing at something else now. Probably one of his friends. The insult had cost him nothing. He would forget it before the night was over. Marcus would not forget it. Marcus never forgot anything. That was the problem. "Lieutenant," he said, "when you've been through what I've been through, reacting stops being an option. Reacting is for young people. Reacting means you still believe words can hurt you. Words stopped hurting me a very long time ago." "What still hurts, sir?" He looked at her. She hadn't meant it as a trap, but it was a trap. It was the kind of question that only a young person could ask because only a young person didn't know it was a question. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Silence." "Sir, silence hurts, the kind of silence that comes after a name gets read on a memorial list. The kind of silence in a house after the funeral is over. That kind." She looked at him. He didn't look back. "That's what still hurts, Lieutenant. Nothing else. Just that." Then the Empress entered the hall. Every Vrenar in the room went still. The music stopped. The humans uncertain stopped moving too. She was tall, taller than any Vrenar Marcus had seen. Her skin was paler than the others, almost silver in the light. She wore a gown of deep red. Her hair was white and long. Her eyes were black. Empress Valora of the Vrenar Dominion. She did not walk into the room. She arrived in it. The distinction mattered. Walking suggested effort. Arrival suggested inevitability. She surveyed the hall. Her eyes passed over the delegations, over the ambassadors, over the guests. Her gaze did not linger. She saw nothing that surprised her. Except her eyes stopped. On Marcus. Marcus felt it. He'd felt many things in his life. He'd felt plasma fire brush past his cheek at Terminus. He'd felt the ground give out beneath him in the tunnels of Carsac. He'd felt his first wife's cold hand in a morgue on Delta Station and his second wife's absence in a house full of ash on Meridian 9. He'd felt many things, but he had never felt anything quite like the weight of Empress Valora's attention. She looked at him for perhaps 3 seconds. She looked at his medals. She looked at his face. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes did. Then she looked away. She descended the dais. She began greeting the ambassadors. Nadia was fourth in line. Marcus watched Valora exchange perfectly correct diplomatic pleasantries with each delegation. Haven stood just behind her right shoulder. Caven was watching Marcus. Caven was smiling. And Marcus, 64 years old, 46 years in service, 99 wars deep, understood something in that moment that he could not yet articulate. He understood that this reception was not what it appeared to be. He understood that he had been brought here for a reason no one had told him. And he understood that the smiling man behind the Empress was going to try to destroy him before it was over. He was right, but not in the way he thought. Rhea knocked at his door at 23:40 that night. Marcus was still awake. He'd been standing by the window. The flowers were still white. The moons were still up. She entered. She was in fatigues, off duty. Her hair was down. She looked younger this way, almost like a person and not just a uniform. She was carrying 2 mugs. "Tea, sir, if you drink it." "I drink it." She handed him one. She sat down on the edge of the bed. He remained by the window. Neither of them spoke for a while. The tea was warm. Vernar groaned. It tasted like nothing on earth. It was slightly bitter and slightly sweet at the same time. "Sir." "Yes, Lieutenant." "I've been reading Caven's file all night, and there are gaps." "What kind of gaps?" "4 gaps, 40 years apart. Each one is about 6 months long. During each gap, he's on extended leave at his family estate. And during each of those 6-month period, a human colony was attacked." Marcus set the mug down, very slowly. "Which colonies?" "Sir." "Which colonies, Lieutenant?" She hesitated. She had a tablet in her hand. She looked at it. She looked at him. She looked at the tablet again. "Sir, the first one was Delta Station. 38 years ago, you were 26. Marcus closed his eyes. Delta Station, where Elena had been, where his first wife had been, the bacteriologist he'd married in 3 weeks of leave, 6 months later dead, attacked, killed, cremated, returned to him in a small box. "Sir, keep going." "The second was Meridian 9. Meridian 9, 16 years ago. Meridian 9, where Sarah had been, his second wife, the other one, the quiet one, the one he'd married at 45 because he couldn't take being alone anymore. 3 years and then ash, just ash." "Sir, the other 2 are less relevant to you personally, but they were also human colonies. 42,000 civilians dead across all 4. Marcus did not move. He did not open his eyes. He said, "Are you certain, Lieutenant?" "No, sir." "Then find out." "Yes, sir." "And Lieutenant, sir, you do not talk to anyone else about this. Not Nadia, not the delegation, not your friends back home, no one." "Understood, sir." "If Caven knows what you know, he will kill you. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Say it, we. He will kill me, sir." "Good." She stood up to leave. At the door, she paused. "Sir." "Lieutenant, my father, in the letter. You wrote that he died trying. Do you remember writing that?" He opened his eyes. He looked at her. He remembered. He remembered writing it in a field hospital at 2 in the morning with his hands shaking, with the smell of antiseptic in his nose, with the taste of blood in his mouth from where he'd bitten his tongue. He remembered choosing that word carefully. Trying, not brave, Not honored. Trying. He said yes. Why that word? He thought about it. I thought about Elias Marsden dying in his arms. He thought about how Elias had not asked to be remembered as brave. He had not asked to be remembered as a soldier. He had asked to be remembered as someone who had tried to come back to a 3-year-old girl. Marcus said, because that's what he asked me to say. Rhea nodded. She left. Marcus stood at the window until dawn. He did not sleep. He did not sleep at all. Part 2. Morning came to Vernar in gold. Marcus watched it through the window. The 2 moons had set. The sun was rising over the eastern spires. The white flowers in the garden below were opening. He hadn't known they opened. He'd assumed they were always open because he'd only ever seen them at night. He was still standing where he'd been at dawn. His tea had gone cold 4 hours ago. He drank it anyway. The door chimed. Come. Nadia entered. She was in formal dress, blue, high collar, the kind of thing an ambassador wore when she was about to walk into a room full of people who wanted to say no to her. She was carrying a small folder. She looked tired. She was tired. He was tired. Everyone in this palace was tired, and only some of them knew why. You didn't sleep, she said. I never sleep. You look worse than usual. Thank you, Nadia. You're welcome. She sat down on the chair by the desk. She set the folder on her lap. She did not open it. She looked at him for a long moment. It was the kind of look she gave him sometimes. The look that said she was about to ask him something she'd been rehearsing for years. She said, Marcus, Nadia, I need to tell you something. You have already told me a lot of things. I need to tell you something else. He waited. She opened the folder. Inside was a photograph. Old paper. The kind of thing you didn't see much anymore because everything was digital now, but people still kept the old ones. She slid the photograph across the desk toward him. He picked it up. It was a man in uniform. Terran Coalition. Sergeant stripes, dark skin, kind eyes. Standing in front of a transport with a bag over his shoulder. Smiling like a man who thought he was going to come home. Marcus's hand did not shake, but it wanted to. He said, Okafor. Yes. Sergeant Okafor, Kepler 9, Battle of the Third Day. Yes. He was 31. Yes. I wrote a letter. You wrote a letter. Marcus set the photograph down. He looked at Nadia. He looked at her the way he had not looked at her in the 15 years he'd known her. He looked at her jaw. He looked at her eyes. He looked at the small mark on her left temple that he had assumed was a birthmark. It was not a birthmark. It was the exact same mark Sergeant Okafor had on his own left temple in the photograph. Marcus said, how old were you? 6. 6. When the letter came, I was 6 years old. He nodded. He did not know what else to do. He nodded. Nadia said, my mother read it to me every night for a year. She said it was the only thing that kept her from following him. Nadia. I know, Marcus. I know you didn't know. I've known that you didn't know for 22 years. I've been very careful not to let you know. Why could you? Because I didn't want you to feel obligated to me. I wanted you to know me first, as a person. You did that. Yes. You did that on purpose. Yes. He picked up the photograph again. Sergeant Okafor, 31 years old, kind eyes, standing in front of a transport that would take him to Kepler 9, where he would die 4 days later in a trench that Marcus had ordered dug in a defensive position that Marcus had chosen in a war that Marcus had been assigned to and had not chosen but had fought anyway because that was the job. Marcus said, Nadia. Yes, I'm sorry. Don't. Nadia. Marcus, don't. That's not why I told you. Then why did you tell me? She reached across the desk. She took the photograph back. She held it in both hands. She looked at it. She looked at her father. She looked at the man who had been dead for 30 years and would never see her graduate from the academy and would never see her become an ambassador and would never see her to walk into an alien palace with the man who had written the letter that had kept her mother alive. She said, because you needed to know that some of them didn't die for nothing. He didn't answer. She stood up. She walked to the door. She stopped. You wrote to me too once in the letter. You wrote a line just for me. Do you remember it? He remembered. Of course he remembered. He remembered everything. She said it before he could. Tell my kid I loved her. She walked out. The door closed behind her. Marcus sat down on the bed. For the first time in decades, he did not know what to do with his hands. The formal negotiations began at 10. Marcus was not required to attend. He attended anyway, because Rhea had asked him to, because Rhea was in the observation gallery running facial recognition on every noble in the chamber, because Rhea was doing something that could get her killed, and Marcus was not going to leave her alone in a room full of Vinar while she did it. He sat in the back. He said nothing. For 6 hours, he said nothing. The Vrinar spoke. The humans spoke. Caven spoke often, always in that soft voice, always with that soft smile. He spoke about human aggression. He spoke about human expansion. He spoke about the burden the Alliance had placed on Vrinar in defending human colonies that had provoked their own attackers. Marcus watched. Marcus counted. Marcus counted the number of times Caven used the word aggression, 23. He counted the number of times Caven used the word restraint, 14. He counted the number of times Caven looked at him. 9. Caven looked at him 9 times. Each time Caven smiled. Each time Marcus did not. At the end of the session, as the delegates were filing out, Caven drifted over, casually, like a man who had happened to be walking in that direction. He stopped in front of Marcus's chair. Commander, not a commander. Old habits, as I said. What do you want, Caven? I want to walk with you, in the garden, if you have a moment. Marcus considered. He considered saying no. He considered a number of things he could have said, none of which would have accomplished anything except making Caven more careful. He said, fine. The garden was full of the white flowers. They walked slowly. Caven's robe brushed the gravel path. Marcus's boots did not. He'd learned long ago how to walk without sound. Caven said, you are troubled, Commander. I'm always troubled. About the negotiations. About many things. I would like to help you. Would you? I would. How? Caven stopped walking. He turned to Marcus. The sunlight caught the embroidery on his robe, the family sigil at the hem. Marcus had not paid close attention to it before. He paid attention now. A stylized bird, or perhaps a fish. It was hard to tell. Caven said, the Vrinar court respects strength, Commander, but it also respects humility. If humanity were to make a small gesture, an acknowledgement, just a public statement, that your species has learned from its past aggressive posture, that you regret certain expansions, certain wars. Marcus said nothing. Caven continued. If such a statement were made by a decorated human veteran, a man whose service record speaks for itself, someone who could not be accused of weakness, it would carry great weight with the Empress. It would preserve the Alliance. It would save many lives. You want me to apologize. I want you to help. For what? For being a warlike species. Marcus looked at him. Marcus looked at him for a very long time. He looked at the soft smile, the old face, the embroidered robe, the kind eyes, the manicured hands. The man who had never held a rifle, who had never held a dying friend, who had never written a letter to a 6-year-old girl in the dark of a field hospital. Marcus said, no, Commander, no, you have not considered. I've considered it. The answer is no. Caven's smile did not falter, but something behind his eyes did. That is unfortunate, Caven said. Yes. For many reasons. Was that a threat? I do not threaten. I predict. Then predict this. Yes. Yes. Marcus stepped closer. He was shorter than Caven. He had always been a short man, 5'8" in his boots. But he had learned over the course of 99 wars how to make himself feel taller when he needed to. He needed to now. If anything happens to Lieutenant Marsden, Marcus said, or to Ambassador Okafor, or to any member of my delegation, I will find the man responsible, and I will end him personally. Commander, I don't care how many guards you have. I don't care what rank you hold. I don't care what your Empress thinks of it. I've spent 46 years killing people. I'm very good at it. I don't do it anymore. But I remember how. You would not dare. I would. You are a diplomat now. I'm a man with nothing left to lose. Caven held his gaze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The white flowers moved in the breeze. Then Caven smiled again. We shall see, he said. He turned. He walked away. Mark stood in the garden for a long time after. He did not shake. He was very proud of that. That evening in Marcus's quarters, Rhea laid the tablet on his desk. She had a bruise on her jaw. Marcus said, explain. I fell. Lieutenant. Sir. Explain the bruise. Two men, sir, in the West Corridor. They didn't get very far. They were amateurs. Two men. Yes, sir. Vraynar or human? Vraynar, sir, younger than court staff, junior guards, sloppy. They didn't finish the job. But they started it. Yes, sir. Marcus sat down. He put his hands on the desk. He did not shake. He was again very proud of that. He said, show me what you found. She showed him. For the next 2 hours, she walked him through it. The 4 colony attacks, the 4 gaps in Kevin's schedule, the transmission logs buried in old archives showing Vraynar fleet dispatches that had been recalled at the last minute. The recall codes had come from Kevin's office. The recall codes had been buried under 3 layers of routing to disguise the source. But the source was there, if you knew where to look. Rhea had known where to look, because her father had died in a war that Kevin had prolonged, and because Marcus had trained a generation of officers who knew where to look for things people wanted to hide. Marcus said, this is enough, sir, for a court-martial, not for this. Sir Amar, we're not in a Terran court. We're in a Vraynar palace. Kevin has 42 years of political capital. We have a bruise and some intercepted logs. So what do? We wait, sir. We wait, Lieutenant. He tried to have me killed. He tried. He didn't succeed. If he'd wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Ed, he wanted to warn us. To warn us. Yes. About what? About the fact that he knows we know. She stared at him. That's insane, sir. It's politics. It's insane. Same thing, Lieutenant. She sat down. She rubbed her jaw. It was going to bruise darker before it healed. She'd have to explain it to Nadia in the morning. She'd have to lie. She'd have to say she'd tripped on a step. Nadia would not believe her. Nadia would not press. Marcus said, get some rest, Lieutenant. I'm not tired. Get some rest anyway. Sir, when are we going to move on him? Soon. How soon? When he moves on us. Sir, when he moves on us, Lieutenant. That's how you catch a man like Kevin. You let him think he's winning, and you wait for him to reach. She nodded. She stood. She left. Marcus sat at the desk. He looked at the tablet. He looked at the transmission logs. He looked at the dates. Delta Station, Elena, 26 years old, both of them. He'd been a captain. She'd been a bacteriologist. He had married her in 3 weeks of leave and lost her in 6 months of assignment. She had died in a colony attack that could have been stopped, that should have been stopped, that would have been stopped if a Vraynar noble with an embroidered robe had not decided to keep his fleet at home. Marcus closed the tablet. He walked to the window. The white flowers were still open in the moonlight. He said her name out loud for the first time in 20 years. Elena. Just the once. Then he went to bed. He did not sleep, but he lay down, which was more than he usually did. He dreamed of Sarah. He had not dreamed of Sarah in a long time. He dreamed of the house on Meridian 9, the one they'd bought together, small, white walls, A porch, a garden that Sarah had planted with vegetables she didn't know how to grow. She'd kept trying anyway. She'd said it was important to keep trying at things you weren't good at. He dreamed of coming home to that house. He dreamed of finding ash instead of a house. He dreamed of standing in the ash for 3 days, which was what he had actually done. He had actually stood in the ash for 3 days, not eating, not sleeping, not calling anyone, just standing there. His command had sent officers to find him. He'd sent them away. He'd stood in the ash until his boots had turned gray and his eyes had turned red and his mouth had gone dry. On the fourth day, he had picked up a small piece of pottery from the ash. Sarah's favorite mug, half of it, just the handle. He had put it in his pocket. He had gone back to his unit. I had not spoken of Sarah again. Not to anyone. Not for 16 years. Until now, in this dream, in this palace, on this alien world. He said her name. Sarah. Just the once, and then he woke up. And then he remembered that Caven had killed her too. The next morning, Marcus went to see Nadia. She was at breakfast in the diplomatic wing, alone, reading a report. She looked up when he came in. She saw his face. She set the report down. She dismissed the attendants with a flick of her hand. She waited. He sat across from her. He said, Nadia, Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Ask. Did you know? Know what? Did you know about Kaiven, about Delta Station, about Meridian 9? She held his gaze. She did not blink. She did not lie. He would have known. She said, not before we came here. I've had suspicions for 6 years. I've had no proof. Suspicions. I ran an unofficial analysis 3 years ago, cross-referenced Renar fleet movements against human colony losses. There was a pattern. I couldn't trace it. I filed it away. You didn't tell me? No. Why? Because if I had told you and it had been nothing, I would have destroyed you for no reason. And if I had told you and it had been something, I would have destroyed you anyway. He nodded. That was true. He said, you brought me here to find out. I brought you here because you were the only human alive who could sit across from that Empress and not flinch. What Rhea has discovered was a bonus I did not expect. A bonus? That's what I said. Nadia. Marcus. I'm gonna kill him. No, you're not. Nadia. Marcus, you are not going to kill him. Yeah, you're going to do something worse. What? You are going to let him hang himself in public, in front of his Empress, in front of his court, in front of every noble he has spent 40 years lying to. How? You are going to answer a question honestly. What question? You will know when she asks it. He stared at her. She did not elaborate. She never elaborated. That was one of the things he had always disliked about her. That was one of the things he had always respected about her. That night he could not stop remembering. He remembered Kepler 9. He was 34. He was a major brevet colonel. He was in command of the 2nd Battalion of the 18th Coalition Marines. They'd been sent to hold a mountain pass on Kepler 9 for 72 hours. Long enough for the civilian evacuation to complete. Long enough for the transports to get out. There had been 407 of them. There had been 47 of them at the end. Marcus had walked out of the pass on the 3rd day at Yo 347 hours, carrying a wounded corporal on his back. The corporal had died an hour later. Marcus had put the corporal down on the transport deck and had gone back into the medical bay to sit with the others. He had sat with them for 6 hours. Not speaking, just sitting. He had received the Distinguished Service Cross for Kepler 9. He did not remember the ceremony. He remembered nothing of the ceremony. He remembered only the smell of the mountain pass at dawn, the way the light had come through the smoke, the way the smoke had smelled like a thing that used to be a person. He remembered writing 47 letters that week. He remembered every name, including Sergeant Okafor, especially Sergeant Okafor. Because Sergeant Okafor had made him laugh 12 hours before he died. Sergeant Okafor had told a joke. Marcus could not remember the joke now. He could only remember laughing, which had been unusual because Marcus had rarely laughed on deployment. He remembered the laugh. He remembered that afterward, Okafor had said, "Sir, if I don't make it out, tell my kid I loved her." He remembered saying, "Tell her yourself." He remembered Okafor saying, "Sir, in case." He remembered saying, "In case then, I will." He had, and Nadia had grown up, and Nadia had become an ambassador, and Nadia had brought him here. At the end of the third week, the imperial court held its formal session. The great hall was fuller than the reception had been. Every noble in the empire had come, fleet officers in silver, priests in white, court advisors in purple. Ambassadors from every alliance world stood in their delegations. Nadia stood at the head of the human delegation in her formal blue, her jaw set. Caven stood behind the throne. He was smiling. He had been smiling more all week, which meant he thought he was winning, which meant he was about to reach. Empress Vealora entered. Every Vernar in the hall bowed. The humans nodded. The other species did whatever their protocols demanded. The Empress ascended the dais. She seated herself on the throne. She did not smile. She looked out over the hall. Her eyes found Marcus, again, the same way as at the reception. 3 seconds, no longer. But this time she did not look away right afterward. She kept looking. She was making a decision. He could see her making the decision. She made it. She raised her hand. The hall fell silent. She said, "The human veteran." Nadia stiffened at the front of the delegation. Rhea at Marcus's shoulder went completely still. Marcus did not move. The Empress said, "Approach." He walked forward. Every eye in the hall turned to him. 2,000 pairs of eyes, Vrenar, human, everyone. He walked slowly. He was not in a hurry. He had learned a long time ago that you should never let anyone see you hurry. He stopped 10 paces from the throne. He bowed. Correctly, precisely, in the Vernar manner. He had studied this. He had practiced it. He would not give her the satisfaction of a badly performed bow. She said, "Rise." He rose. She looked at him. She looked at his uniform. She looked at the rows of ribbons on his chest. She looked at the medals. She looked at his face. She said, "Your decorations are excessive." The hall did not move. Marcus did not answer. She said, "I have seen commanders of my own fleet who wear fewer decorations. I have seen generals who wear fewer decorations. I find it curious that a human of your rank in your retirement would present himself in this manner." He waited. He knew what was coming. He had known what was coming since the reception, since the first time her eyes had found him, since Nadia had said, "You will know when she asks it." The Empress said, "Tell me, human, how many wars have you fought?" The hall waited. Caven waited. He was smiling. He thought Marcus would lie. He thought Marcus would exaggerate. He thought Marcus would say 10 or 20 and be caught in a public embarrassment, and the whole delegation would suffer for it. He thought this was the moment when he won. Marcus looked at her. He looked at Caven. He looked back at her. He said, 99, Your Majesty." The hall did not react at first. They did not understand. Because the number was not a number they could process. Then slowly they began to understand. The murmur started at the back. It spread forward. It reached the front. It reached the throne. The Empress of the Vernar Dominion, ruler of 32 worlds, commander of the largest fleet in known space, opened her mouth to speak, and for the first time in her 50-year reign, no words came out. Caven's smile did not falter. But his hand had gone very still. Marcus saw it. Marcus saw the hand. And Marcus, 64 years old, understood that the reach had happened. The fall would come next. Part 3, the silence in the hall was the loudest thing Marcus had ever heard. He had heard many loud silences. The silence after Elena's funeral. The silence in the pass at Kepler 9 when the shooting finally stopped. The silence in the ash of Meridian 9 on the fourth day when he had picked up the piece of Sarah's mug. This silence was louder than all of them. Because this silence was full of 2,000 people holding their breath. The Empress said, "Repeat that." Marcus said, "99, Your Majesty." "You are exaggerating." "I am not. That is not possible." "It is. No individual." 99, Your Majesty. 99 wars. 46 years of service. I enlisted at 18. I am 64 years old. Every one of these decorations represents a specific operation. Every operation was part of a conflict. I can provide documentation. Documentation. Yes, Your Majesty. Now, Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his dress uniform. He took out a data chip. He had brought it because Nadia had told him to bring it. He had not asked her why. He had understood in that moment on the transport that Nadia had been planning this for longer than he had realized. Perhaps longer than he could have imagined. He held the chip up. A Vernar attendant descended from the dais, silent, robed, took the chip, carried it to the Empress, placed it in the reader beside her throne. The hologram flickered up. Marcus's service record. Every deployment, every campaign, every operation, every unit he had commanded, every casualty list he had signed. It scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. For a full minute it scrolled. The hall watched. Caven watched. Caven's hand was still very still. The Empress read. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes did. When the scroll finally stopped, she looked at Marcus. She said 99. Yes, Your Majesty. How is it possible? Humanity does not have the luxury of choosing when to fight, Your Majesty. We are a young species in a dangerous region of space. We fight because if we do not, we die. I fought because I was good at it. I stayed because every time I tried to leave, another war began. I stayed because inexperienced officers cost lives. I stayed because I could not sleep at night, knowing that soldiers were dying who might have lived if I had been there. You could have retired. I did retire, Your Majesty, twice. Both times I was called back. By whom? By the same voice, Your Majesty, my own. She was silent. She looked at him. She looked at the hologram of his service record, still hanging in the air beside her throne. She said, "What did it cost you?" "Everything, Your Majesty." "Elaborate." He waited. He looked at the floor. He looked back up. He said, "I enlisted at 18 with 11 friends from my home colony. By the time I was 25, all 11 were dead. I have been married twice. Both of my wives died in colony attacks while I was deployed elsewhere. I have no children. I have not slept a full night in 23 years. I take medication to sleep at all. I have written letters to the families of soldiers who died under my command. I have written so many letters that I no longer remember how many. But I remember every name I wrote at the top of each one." The hall was still silent, but the silence had a texture now. The Vernar equivalent of tears was a soft light behind the eyes, a luminescence, a slow glow that meant grief. Half the hall was glowing. Marcus did not know that. He did not know Vernar physiology well enough to recognize it. But Nadia knew, and Rhea, standing at the back of the human delegation, saw it and understood that something was happening that had not happened in the Vrenar court in centuries. The Empress said, "You bear this burden alone. There are others, Your Majesty, others like you. Not many, not with my service length, but there are hundreds of humans with military records that would surprise you. Thousands if you include the retired. Hundreds. Yes, Your Majesty." Ambassador Okafor. Nadia stepped forward. "Your Majesty, is this accurate?" "It is, Your Majesty. Commander Hale's record is exceptional in duration but not in kind. Human military service for career soldiers typically involves multiple conflicts. The Alliance has not been fully transparent about the scope of human military engagement. This was, I believe, a diplomatic error on our part." "An error?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Why? Because we did not want to appear desperate. You did not want to appear desperate. No, Your Majesty, a species that has fought as many wars as we have appears either aggressive or beleaguered. Neither impression serves our interests. We chose to appear neither. You chose to appear, yes, Your Majesty. How? Restrained. The Empress considered this. Then in a voice that could have cut steel, she said, "That was a mistake." Nadia did not answer. The Empress said, "That was a mistake, Ambassador Okafor. It was a mistake for you. It was a mistake for me. And it was a mistake that has been exploited by others in this court." She turned her head. She looked for the first time at Caven. Caven's smile was gone. His hand was moving now, slowly, toward the inside of his robe. Marcus saw it. Rhea saw it. Rhea moved. She was across the hall in 4 steps. She was not supposed to move. She was a foreign officer in a foreign court. Any movement toward a Vrinar noble was technically an act of war. She did it anyway, because her father had died in Marcus's arms 25 years ago, and because Marcus was going to be a person she had lost too if she didn't move. She crossed to the dais. She stopped 3 meters from Caven. She said, "Your Majesty, permission to address the court." The hall went still again. The Empress looked at her. The Empress looked at Caven. The Empress said, "Granted." Caven's hand stopped moving. Rhea drew a tablet from her uniform pocket. Not a weapon, a tablet, which was in that moment the more dangerous of the two. She said, "Your Majesty, my name is Lieutenant Rhea Marsden. I have served as Commander Hale's escort officer for this mission. In the course of my duties, I have uncovered evidence of a systematic pattern of Vrinar non-compliance with treaty obligations, specifically 4 instances in the past 40 years in which Vrinar fleet response to human colony attacks was recalled at the last minute, recalled by a single office, recalled by the office of Lord Caven, senior advisor to the imperial court." The murmur started again. This time it was different. This time it was Vrinar voices. Rhea continued. "The first recall took place 38 years ago. The target was Delta Station. Casualty count, 2,700 civilians, including Elena Vasquez Hale, Commander Hale's first wife." Marcus did not react. He was very proud of that. Rhea continued. "The second recall took place 16 years ago. The target was the colony of Meridian 9. Casualty count, 9,000 civilians, including Sarah Cole Hale, Commander Hale's second wife." Marcus did not react. He was still very proud of that. But his hands wanted to shake. Rhea continued. "The third and fourth recalls involved additional human colonies. Kepler Outer, Fornax Reach. Total casualty count across all 4 incidents, 42,000 civilians." She looked at Caven. She said, 42,000 people, not soldiers, not warriors, farmers, teachers, children, elderly. My father died in Commander Hale's arms when I was 3 years old. My mother raised me on his letter. I have not slept well since I first read that letter at 15. Commander Hale has not slept well since he was 41. And the man behind that dais, the man in the purple robe, the man with the embroidered bird on his hem. She lifted the tablet. That man made it happen. She placed the tablet on the dais. She stepped back. She stood at attention. The hall stopped breathing. Caven said, "This is a fabrication." His voice was steady. Marcus admired that in a distant way. It took discipline to keep your voice steady when everything you had built was about to collapse in front of the woman you had spent 40 years lying to. Caven said, "The lieutenant is a foreign intelligence officer. The commander is a broken old man being used to destabilize this court. The ambassador has been planning this for years," Nadia said. "That last part is correct." The hall turned toward her. She stepped forward. She stood beside Marcus. She said, "Your Majesty, I have been planning this for 6 years, since I first began to suspect a pattern in Vrinar noncompliance. I did not raise my suspicions through official channels because I did not have proof. Lieutenant Marsden obtained the proof this week. She did so at considerable personal risk. She was attacked 2 nights ago by men wearing Vernar Jr. Guard uniforms. She defended herself. The Empress said, "This is a serious accusation. It is your majesty. Do you understand what you are asking me to do? I am not asking you to do anything, your majesty. I am asking you to consider evidence." Ambassador, yes, your majesty. You are more dangerous than I realized. Yes, your majesty. The Empress almost smiled. Almost. Something moved in her face that could have been a smile if she had been the kind of Empress who smiled. Then she turned to Caven. She said, "Lord Caven, your majesty, do you deny these charges?" "I do, your majesty. Completely." "You deny the recall orders." "They are fabrications, your majesty." "You deny the routing through your office." "Fabrications, your majesty." "You deny the timeline." "Fabrications, your majesty. All fabrications." The Empress looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Kevin, old friend, I have suspected you for 3 years." The color drained from Kevin's face. It happened slowly. It was very satisfying to watch. The Empress said, "I did not have proof. I have been waiting for proof. You have been very careful. Your enemies were fewer than you thought and slower than you feared, and I have not been able to catch you. Until today. When I brought a human commander to this court and gave him a lieutenant with a father's memory and an ambassador with a daughter's patience, and I watched you reach for a weapon in my own hall." Caven said, "Your Majesty, do not speak. Your Majesty, please. Do not speak, Caven." He stopped speaking. The Empress said, "Guards." 4 silver-armored Vernar entered from the sides of the hall. They took Caven gently. He did not struggle. He looked in that moment very old. He looked in that moment like a man who had not been very careful, who had in fact been rather sloppy for a very long time, who had believed his own importance more than the world had, and who had built his life on the assumption that his Empress would never look at him too closely. The Empress had looked. She had looked for 3 years. Kevin was let out. The hall was silent. Marcus stood in the middle of it. He did not know what to do with his hands. The Emperor stood. The court gasped. She descended the dais. She descended the 7 steps of the throne dais, which no Vernar Empress had done in 92 years. And she walked across the marble floor of the great hall, and she stopped in front of Marcus. She was taller than him. She looked down at him. Then she did something no Vernar had done to a human in the history of the Alliance. She bowed. Not the ceremonial half bow, not the diplomatic acknowledgement. The full bow, the one Vernar reserved for their honored dead. The hall gasped again. She said, "Commander Hale." Marcus said, "Your Majesty, I have wronged you." "You have not, Your Majesty. You did not know." "I did not know because I did not ask. I did not ask because I did not think you were worth asking." "That is the definition of wronging you, Commander." He did not answer. He did not know how to answer. I had spent 46 years learning how to accept casualties. He had never learned how to accept its apology. The Empress said, "I would offer you honors. I would elevate you to Vernar peerage. I would confer upon you and your descendants a hereditary title and estate on my homeworld. I would build a statue in this hall to honor your service." Marcus said no. She blinked. She had not been expecting that. He said, "Your Majesty, with respect, I do not want honors. I do not want peerage. I do not want a statue. My descendants do not exist. My service is over." "Then what?" "There are others. Others. Others like me. Hundreds of them. Some living, some retired, all damaged. All of them carrying weight that the Alliance has never seen fit to acknowledge. If you wish to make amends for what has happened in this room today, fund them, fund their care, fund their treatment, fund the mental health services that veterans need and rarely receive, fund the widows and the widowers and the children and the survivors." He paused. He was not used to talking this long. He continued, Statues do not help your majesty. Honors do not help. What helps is money and time and someone knocking on the door at 3 in the morning when a veteran cannot sleep. That is what helps. That is what I would ask you to fund. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. She said, "It will be done, Your Majesty. It will be done, Commander. It will be the largest Veterans Care Initiative in the history of the Alliance. It will bear your name. It will not bear my name. Commander, it will not, Your Majesty. If it bears my name, it becomes about me. I do not want it to be about me. Name it after them." After whom? After the ones who did not come back. She nodded slowly. She said, "Then it will be nameless, because they are too many to name." He said, "That would be appropriate, Your Majesty." She looked at him again. She said, "Thank you, Commander." And she turned, and she walked back to her throne. And the great hall of the Vraynar Empire emptied slowly because none of them, not one of them, knew what to do with what they had just seen. Nadia found him afterward, in the garden, where the white flowers were still open. She was carrying something small, a folder. She sat down on a bench beside him. She did not speak for a while. He did not ask her to. Eventually she said, "Marcus, Nadia, I have something for you." She handed him the folder. He opened it. Inside was a piece of paper, old, faded, handwritten, a letter. His hands did shake now. He did not try to stop them. The letter was from Sergeant Okafor, dated 4 days before Kepler 9. Never sent, preserved by Nadia's mother and passed to Nadia when she came of age and kept in a folder for 18 years waiting for the right moment. The letter was addressed to Nadia. She was 3 years old when it was written. Sergeant Okafor had written the letter because he had known in the way soldiers sometimes knew that he might not come home. He had written it to his daughter. He had written about his commanding officer, Major Hale. He had written that Major Hale was the reason he was still alive after 2 tours. That Major Hale kept his soldiers alive. That if anything happened and the letter reached Nadia, he wanted her to know that her father had been under the best commander a man could ask for. The last line of the letter said, "Baby, if you ever meet Major Hale, thank him for me. He is the reason I got as many days with you as I did." Marcus read the letter twice. Then he did something he had not done in 30 years. He cried. He cried very quietly. He cried the way old soldiers cry, not the sobbing of the young, the slow, silent, water in the eyes cry of a man whose body no longer knew how to grieve out loud. Nadia did not touch him. She sat beside him. She let him cry. When he was done, she said, "I have been waiting for a long time to give you that letter." He said, "How long?" 22 years. "Why now?" "Because you needed to know it before you decided what came next." "What comes next?" "Whatever you decide, Marcus." He handed the letter back. She shook her head. "It's yours." He kept it. He folded it carefully. He put it inside his uniform, against his chest, where it would stay for the rest of his life. He said, "Nadia." "Marcus." "Thank you." She smiled. For the first time in 15 years of knowing her, she really smiled. She said, "You're welcome, Dad." She said it as a joke, but she also said it not as a joke. He understood. He did not answer. Some things you did not answer, you just held them. The next morning, Rhea knocked on his door. He was already awake. He was always already awake. She entered. She was in fatigues, off duty. She had a small pack over her shoulder. She had come to say something. He could see it in her face. She said, "Sir, Lieutenant, I want to request a transfer." "Where?" "To your command." "I have no command." "To your service. Whatever you decide to do next, I want to be there." He looked at her. He looked at the young woman who had crossed a Vernar throne room to stand between him and a knife, who had bruised her jaw in a hallway 2 nights ago, who had built a case against a Vernar noble in 3 days that a fleet intelligence team would have taken a year to build, who had in every meaningful way saved his life without him ever noticing. He said, "No, sir. No, Lieutenant. I want to serve with you. You have served with me. Now serve elsewhere." Sir, Rhea, her name. I had not said her name before. She stopped. He said, "You are 28 years old. I am 64. I have spent my life doing what I did because I could not stop. You have your whole life ahead of you. Do not spend it in the shadow of a man who is already gone. Live in the sun, Lieutenant. Please. Sir, you're not gone. I am, most of me. What's left is not enough to build a career around. I don't want a career, I want—" She stopped. She did not know what she wanted. Marcus said, "Yes, you do. You want your father back. And I understand that. And I cannot give him to you. And I will not pretend that I can." She looked at the floor. He said, "Go home, Rhea, get a promotion, marry someone kind, have a child. Name the child anything but Marcus." She almost laughed. She almost cried. She did neither. She saluted. He returned it. She left. He never saw her again. But he thought of her often. He thought of her every night for the rest of his life. He returned to Meridian Station. His apartment was the same. 15 square meters, bare walls, a window, a bed, a pill bottle, the guitar on the wall, his father's guitar. He set down his duffel. He looked at the guitar. He looked at it for a long time. Then he took it down. He sat on the bed with it. It felt strange in his lap. Too big, too small. The wood was warm. The strings were dead. He tuned them. He remembered how to tune. His father had shown him when he was 6 years old, and his hands remembered, even though he had not touched the instrument in 46 years. He tuned. He played a chord. It sounded terrible. He played another chord. It sounded slightly less terrible. He played a third chord, and then a fourth, and then a fragment of a melody his father had played on the porch of their house when Marcus was 5 years old, and he had forgotten he knew and his fingers had not forgotten. He played for an hour, badly, beautifully. He played until his fingers hurt because they had not made the shape in half a century, and they had to remember, and remembering hurt, and the hurt was different from the other hurt he was used to. And the difference was that this hurt got better instead of worse. He set the guitar down. He looked out the window. The stars were the same stars. He said, "I came home, Dad." Just the once. Then he turned off the light. He lay down on the bed. And for the first time in 23 years, without a pill, without a struggle, without a wall of noise in his head, Marcus Hale fell asleep. He slept for 9 hours. He dreamed of no one, which was in its own way a mercy. The calm at 11 the next morning. He answered. It was Nadia. She said, "Marcus, Nadia, there's a situation, small, a border dispute out past Fornak's reach. Nothing military, just a diplomatic misunderstanding. They need an advisor, someone with your history, not to fight, just to sit in a room and be present. 2 weeks." He looked at the guitar on the bed. He looked at the letter on the table. Sergeant Okafor's letter. He had unfolded it that morning and put it under a paperweight, so he could see it, so he would remember. He looked out the window at the stars. 8,413 nights. He had counted them all. He did not have to count anymore. He said, "Nadia, Marcus, let me think about it. How long do you need?" He looked at the guitar. He looked at the letter. He looked at the stars. He said, "A while." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Take as long as you need, Marcus." "Thank you. You're welcome." He clicked off the comm. He walked to the window. He picked up the guitar. He sat down on the bed, and he began very slowly, very badly, very carefully to play. The stars outside his window spun on as they always had. But Marcus Hale, for the first time in 46 years, was making a sound that was not the sound of a war. He was making the sound of a man coming home.